Hey everybody, glad you can join us today. Hope you all are doing well. My name is Joe Belmonte with Environmental Construction Solutions. And with me, I've got Scott Orndorff with HydraSmart. And we're going to be talking about a unique program today, specifically revolved around hydroseeders and fertility, among other things. And it's very innovative and unique. We've worked with this product for quite a while. It's a proprietary product to us. So let me know where you're joining in from before we get started. Just a little housekeeping, as I like to say. You can ask questions in the chat box. Maybe join in and let me know that you can hear me okay and that you can see my screen. And we'll get rolling right away. I see some folks coming in there from all over. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And for those of you who are new to the ECS webinars, there will also be information at the end of our webinar where you can go online and get a PDH sent to you. And so with that in mind, we'll kind of jump right in and get started. A little bit about environmental construction solutions. We're a one-stop shop for pretty much everything construction supplies with regards specifically to erosion control and some stormwater items. Here is a list of kind of some of the more common things we sell state to state. Everything from silt fence and we're very in touch with seed and DOT seed in every state and native seeds. One of our partner companies in the WS Connelly family of companies is Chesapeake Valley Seed. And we are growing. For those of you who have been on our webinars for years, you know that we've grown from a small mid-Atlantic company into a really kind of southeast and even out in Texas now footprint, even into the Midwest and Indiana and Kentucky. So these are places where we have branches, either environmental construction solution branches or some other branches for the different companies that WS Connelly has bought. You can see all the names of them there down at the bottom. And so HydraSmart is a brand that WS Connelly owns, and they make proprietary to our company. And we actually own the manufacturing facility as well. And it was born out of our need for the turf and ornamental markets that we serve. And then out of that, we started to really create something here for hydroseeders, and that we feel like there's really nothing else like it. So I want to kind of talk to you generally about the basics of hydroseeding. Hydroseeding, a lot of folks know what it is in the engineering and construction world. I see on here we have a lot of civil engineers, a lot of municipal folks, some state folks, some folks that work for hydroseeding and erosion control companies. So a lot of you may have seen a hydroseeder, but never really kind of understood exactly how it worked. There's a big tank there, and you add the fertilizer, the lime, and hydro mulches in there to spray out a slurry over the ground. But you can see the picture on the bottom left of the screen there is a picture of what it looks like all mixed up. There are different kinds of hydro mulches. Some of them are made with recycled paper. Some of them are more erosion control oriented versus just aiding in vegetation. But, I've made the joke before with contractors and engineers that a hydroseeder is kind of like a bathtub gin. You can really just mix anything you want in there, especially if you've got a soil test, and you can very methodically and apply it to an area where you get significant coverage over the entire area. So if you've got questions on hydroseeders in general, certainly reach out to me. If you're kind of new to that realm, but you like some of the things that you see here today, if you have a project and want to rent a hydroseeder, or if you want some ideas of some names of some companies in your area, we certainly know those folks as well and can get you hooked up with somebody that wants to do this. A little bit about the products we're going to talk about today and their availability. So remember that this is a brand that is proprietary to WS Connelly. We sell it through our locations, but we also sell it through other distributors throughout the U.S. So this blue map tells you, where we sell it and where other distributors sell this product for hydroseeders. Even the states that aren't colored blue, we could potentially get you product there. This stuff ships relatively easily if it's something you've got at a job site or have a warehouse that can take delivery. So I want to talk a minute about what this is and kind of how this started. We're going to talk about several different products today that you put in a hydroseeder that help establish vegetation, aid in the soil profile, and really help create long-term sustainable vegetation. But it's important to know where that comes from. And WS Connelly, interestingly enough, before we were a supplier, we were a construction company. And to my knowledge, we think we owned the first hydroseeder in Virginia. If it wasn't the first one, it was one of the first two or three. And the company was then headquartered out of Roanoke, Virginia, and they did a lot of work on the 81 corridor as it was being built up and down the western part of the state. So when we say we develop this product by hydroseeders for hydroseeders, that's our lineage. That's really who we come from, and it was a big part of our company. We know this stuff like the back of our hand. And for years, all of the advancements revolved around hydroseeding. They were really focused on the hydromulches. Like, and for those of you that are no hydroseeding, what I mean by that is like there used to be just paper mulch, and then there was wood mulch, and now there's things like bonded fiber matrices and engineered fiber matrices, and they're all things that will literally stick to the side of a wall and grow grass on there. But all of those advancements for years were revolving around the hydromulches and really not the fertility. And we'll talk about that a little more later on. And as urban sprawl continued and reclamation work grew at mines and pipelines and things of that nature, job sites continued to need soil amendments and better fertility. And hydroseeders as a whole started to find a lot of this on their own. They would go out to the local farm store and talk amongst themselves, and they would find different kinds of liquid fertilizers that they liked because they didn't like putting ag-based fertilizers in their tank and lime in their tank with additives in those products like rock or clay that were harsh on their pumps. So a lot of this stuff hydroseeders have tried, but there was really no rhyme or reason to it. There was really no science behind it, no research behind it. It was more a trial and error function of people trying to find a better mousetrap. And then after that, and we were one of the first folks we think that really came up with something designed for hydroseeders. And we came up with a product called the HydraSmart Acre in a Box. And it was launched in 2019 and it quickly became a staple in the Mid-Atlantic job sites. And it was a combination of a foundation fertilizer and a yield starter and then a liberate additive that was more of a soil amendment and had beneficial bacteria in it. But the challenge is that there were three individual components that you had to put into the hydroseeder. And it was just a bulky process. We needed something really in one jug, and we also needed the ability to add a granular fertilizer with a little more nitrogen and some other factors in there. And so what we did is we updated that HydraSmart program to several products. Most specifically, we're going to talk about today is Hydra Acre and Hydroscape, which is really becoming known as a nutrient system in the construction world that can give uh, your plant and your soil some of the things it needs. And so, just as a start to kind of show what this is possibility of, these are some pictures from some really poor soil job sites that we've done. And now keep in mind that putting something in a hydroseeder and spraying it doesn't negate the work you have to do to prep the soil and get it ready. It needs to be loose, it can't be compacted. But here's a sediment basin on a solar site 18 days after seeding. All right, you can see there that the grass is starting to come in. Here's another sediment basin. Now, granted, these are all nurse crops. They're annual crops because this is temporary seeding. But you can see there the grass coming in very much full coverage. The portion down in the bottom is actually where water was in the sediment pond, which is why there's no grass there. It wasn't seeded. And you can start to see though that this is really it has a very even keel approach because with hydroseeding it can really cover the ground a lot more than just broadcast seeding. The hydromulches that you use keep the seed and fertility in place, and it doesn't run off as much with rains and things of that nature. So a little more long term, here is a solar farm that we planted a reclamation mix on and used HydraSmart products. And this is 1.5 years after initial vegetation. This is kind of a low mow mix, so it had been mowed, I believe one, maybe two times by the time we took this picture. But this is the benefits on poor soils and construction sites that these types of products can help you with. There is a lot of hydroseeding that is done residentially. It kind of goes from market to market in different places in the United States. It's used a lot residentially. In other portions of the country, it's hydroseeding is really more commercially and energy sector driven. But this is just a picture to show that we've used this in residential sites as well, and new construction homes. And if that works in your area, you can certainly use these products as well. So here are the five products total that are in the HydraSmart for hydroseeding line. Hydra Acre and Hydra-Build is what Scott is going to talk about in just a minute. Part of the most important thing, which is the nutrient system of the all the products. Hydrocal dry lime has been around for quite some time. We use that. That is a concentrated lime used to adjust pH on job sites. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Hydrotack is a tackifier that you can use in conjunction with these products and wood mulch and paper mulch. Hydrolock is a moisture management tool that enables you to hold the moisture to be released later on. I'll talk about those three things as well. But the crux of what we're going to talk about today is Hydra Acre and Hydra-Build, how it's kind of changing the game and really where you can implement that into your job site. And so before I turn it over to Scott, I just want to talk about again why these products are different. They're created from the ground up specifically for hydroseeders. They're liquid. The fertility additive that we're going to add there with the granular fertilizer, Scott will talk about how that's easy on the pumps. This is based off university research that's created specifically for turf and erosion control grass species. It can feed the plant, but it can also nourish the soil and create that opportunity for long-term vegetation management. It can also unlock some of the soil nutrients that are already in the soil. So you have better results with less inputs. And less inputs equates to more sustainability for the environment, less potential runoff, and what is applied, more of it is used by the plant. So with that in mind, I will turn it over to Scott and let him get going. And keep posting your questions in here, and we will address them all at the end. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Joe. Good morning, everybody. Like Joe said, I am Scott Orndorff, and I work for the WS Connelly Company. One of the hats that I wear is the business director for our HydraSmart line, which, as Joe said, is our private label product offering that's sold into the turf and ornamental market, on the golf side and lawn and landscape side, and then also into the hydroseeding market. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this off and talk a little bit about the history of some of the modern DOT specs, because I think it's important to understand where some of these specifications came from and why they've been the industry standard for as many years as they have. So if you think about the modern DOT specs, they generally consist of several hundred pounds per acre of a 1:1 ratio fertilizer like a triple 19, right? So where do these specs come from? Joe touched on a really good point. You wind the clock back 50, 60 years ago when hydroseeding first started. It was in its infancy. A lot of the owner operators would go to your feed and seed locations, your mom and pop ag stores, and they were buying what these guys had on their floor at the time, which was these 1 to 1 to 1 ratio fertilizers, right? Because that was common in agriculture, 50, 60, 70 years ago. Um, in probably the 60s and 70s, that bled over into golf and into lawn care. And you segue to what we're all taking a look at and what we're doing now is basically what makes the most sense from a sustainability perspective. Like putting out several hundred pounds per acre of a 1 to 1 ratio fertilizer like a triple 19, does it work? Absolutely. If you flood the soil profile with enough macronutrients, things grow, right? They learned that in agriculture 70, 80 years ago. But as the times have changed in ag and turf, and environmental concerns like water quality and sustainability have come to the forefront, agronomists and soil scientists have done a deep dive into the complex and dynamic world under our feet. And they've looked more at the soil profile and how to make things more efficient. So, what they've discovered is yeah, you can flood the profile with macronutrients, and this addresses basic plant physiology, but soils are more like a three-legged stool made up of chemistry, biology, and physics. And that is really what pushes us into the HydraSmart products. The HydraSmart products are born out of this concept of newer technologies and layers of technologies and looking at this three-legged stool and how can we impact the chemistry and how can we change the physics and how can we feed the natural soil microbes that are there that are basically nature's laborers that do a lot of the work for us, right? So when we built out the nutrient system, which is Hydra Acre and Hydra-Build, all of these things were taken into consideration. And we wanted to take layers of proven technologies from ag and the T&O world and bring those into the construction market. So that being said, I'll reiterate what Joe said. Our lineage is in hydroseeding, and we have probably 15 people on staff that are very, very familiar with the construction industry. They understand the machinery, they understand the challenges that you guys are facing on these sites. They understand that you can't get into a lot of these sites. You don't want to go back after you've been there one time. You want to go ahead and put everything out, get cover as quickly as possible, and get out because the site is a nightmare to get into and get out of. So that being said, I just want to reiterate that when we built these, we try to take the very best of the technologies that are currently being used in production agriculture and the T&O market and bring them over and offer them to you guys on the hydroseeding side. So where did we start? We started with chemistry, the first leg on that stool. And if you think about your limiting factors with chemistry, a big piece of that is soil pH and nutrient availability. I'm going to show a slide here in just a minute where it shows all the different pH ranges and all the different nutrients and where they're the most available. And I'm going to tell you right now that you probably don't have any sites where you're in the range for all of those nutrients to be available. Just from what I've seen from reviewing soil tests and everything like that, I mean, you could have a site that's 4.5 that you're trying to amend the soil with lime and raise the pH, or you could have a site that's extremely alkaline that's 8 or 8.5. You just never know. So what we did was we basically took this technology, which is a nutrient availability polymer, and we added that into, it was originally in our acre in a box technology, but as Joe said, we've consolidated that into the Hydra Acre. And what this technology does is it puts a protective layer around nutrients that have an affinity to bind up as soon as they come in contact with the soil, right? Or they're not available in a very wide pH range. And the one that comes to mind and that we're showing here on this slide is phosphate. Phosphate's really only available in a pH range of about 1 point, basically. And it also has an affinity to bind up with calcium, iron. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that it can bind up with in the soil. So really the start of this technology starts with chemistry and with the Nexus technology. So again, you can see here soil pH impacts nutrient availability. Um, you can see that none of those nutrients are available in the same range, really. I mean, 6.5 to 7.5 is pretty much most things are going to be available. But how often are you working on a site where that actually happens? So the Nexus will protect those nutrients and keep them plant available. So the next piece that we worked on with the nutrient system is starting to take a look at physics. That's the second leg on the stool, which you see here, we've got a slide talking about cation exchange capacity of a soil, which is basically the holding capacity of that soil or bank account, what nutrients you have available. And depending on what kind of site you're working with, if you're working on a very, very sandy site, you're not going to have very good holding capacity. Um, and if you're working on a clay site, you may have too much holding capacity, or you may have a lot of nutrients there that are just basically bound up that you can't utilize. So again, going back to that Nexus technology and what Joe had said earlier is that, sometimes you can unlock the potential of the soil. That's kind of what we're doing with the Nexus technology and then also some of the other proprietary things that we have in there. And then we're also increasing the holding capacity of very, very poor sandy soils. So why Hydra Acre? So Hydra Acre is an all-in-one formulation of our proven acre in a box technologies. It's a combination of the Hydra Foundation, the Yield Starter, and the Liberate. When we built this out, we did not want to lose anything in the building of the product, and it basically equates to about 0.8 gallons of each component. It's specifically formulated for hydroseeding crop and turf grass establishment, and it's a proprietary blend of humic acid, fulvic acid, nutrient availability polymers, which is the Nexus technology, polyphosphate, which is a mixture of ortho and polyphosphate or short and long chain phosphates. Again, layering different technologies and working a lot with chemistry, which is one of those legs on the stool. Carbon, carbon is food for microbes, which is that third leg of the stool. Cytokinins and auxins from seed plant extracts. Those are there as primarily as a food for microbes, but they can also be utilized by the new seedlings when they come up and help out with stress, the plant being able to handle better drought stress, wear tolerance, and very crummy soils. Also, it produces an environmental buffer. And then phosphorus liberating microbes, again, being able to harness and lock into things that are stuck in the soil that are bound up. And then that Nexus technology that's in the Hydra Acre product will protect that phosphorus after those phosphorus liberating microbes are able to break that bond in the soil. So your rate on Hydra Acre is going to be 2.5 gallons per acre for most sites. If you're working with an extremely challenging site, you may be taking a look at doing 5 gallons per acre. But for most sites, 2.5 gallons per acre is going to do the trick. MSRP is $180 per 2.5, or roughly $180 per acre for most sites. So the second part of this nutrient system is the Hydroscape Build 1057. And I'm going to be the first one to tell you that it's no coincidence that we put build in the name of a construction product. This was built specifically for you guys, and it's multi-pronged here. Okay. So it builds the soil, and it's also being used on sites where there's building and construction going on, hence the name. So that's the second piece of this nutrient system that we built out. So what is 1057 Hydroscape Build? It's a combination of two proven technologies. The first being from a company called Yara. Yara is a European company that has been producing nitrate-based nitrogen sources for probably the better part of 110 or 115 years. They're the biggest producer in the world. They produce a very, very nice homogeneous particle product. And what makes this unique is it's multi-layered. Again, we don't have just one phosphate source. This product has, MAP, DAP. It's got sulfate of potash in it. It's got some ammonium nitrate. Again, going back to the chemistry piece, I mean, ammonium is a very strong cation. It has the ability to push things off of the colloid. So you're getting not just the nitrogen component, but whatever else that gets bumped off or bullied off of the colloid on the site. So that's one piece of this build product. The second piece is Earthworks 343 Replenish. It's an Omni certified organic soil conditioner, essentially. It is composted poultry manure from egg laying hens. I only tell you guys about the egg laying hens piece because that's kind of important. They feed them limestone, they feed these egg laying hens limestone. So there is a very soluble calcium source that's actually attached to this poultry litter that Earthworks itself doesn't claim and they don't really talk about on their label, but it's there and it helps out. If you think about the cap of every root, doesn't matter whether it's a monocot or a dicot, the cap of every single root is a cap of calcium. So as those new seedlings are putting on root mass, they are actively going through the soil trying to find soluble calcium. So it's important that not only are you using, your limestone type materials and everything like that as your soil amendments, but that you also have some soluble calcium out there that's basically available for the plant. So you're getting a little bit of that out of this 343. Um, the 1057 Hydroscape Build is a composite homogeneous blend. Why is that important if you're putting it in a hydroseeder, right? That's probably the first question that I would ask. Not super important in a hydroseeder, but in the event that you have to spread or broadcast on a site, you're getting the same coverage and the same analysis basically in each particle that you're putting out. So it's going to produce a more consistent product, whether you're broadcasting or you're putting it in a hydroseeder. So why Hydroscape Build? Hydroscape Build, again, specifically designed and built for hydroseeding to be used in conjunction with Hydra Acre to enhance the benefits of acre and bolster the nutrient load. It can be used on warm and cool season species. High efficiency nutrient uptake equals environmental stewardship and also rapid establishment. You're getting an extremely efficient product. You're getting a very high load of carbon, which is good for the microbes. Again, that third leg on the stool, which is very, very important. And you're also getting rapid establishment because you do have the ammonium nitrate component. So it's not like it's all slow release. You're getting a nice, a nice jag in there. Um, again, designed to be built or designed to be used in a nutrient system with Hydra Acre. The Nexus technology, this is important. The Nexus technology that's in the Hydra Acre will protect the NP and K that's in the Hydra build, the Hydrascape build 1057, while it's in the tank. There is enough free nutrient availability polymer that is in that Hydra Acre to keep the additional NP and K that's in the build product plant available and protected. Use rates 100 to 200 pounds per acre. You can go higher than this. I've talked to some guys that use 50 pounds per acre. It's really up to you, but 100 to 200 pounds puts you right in the median. I think Joe's got a slide here towards the tail end of this that he's going to talk with you about that I think has 250 pounds per acre of build spec'd into it. But for most sites, 100 to 200 pounds per acre. Target rate, basing it on roughly a bag per tank. MSRP, $40 per 50-pound bag. And cost per acre, roughly $120 to $160 per acre. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back over to Joe here, and he's going to talk with you a little bit about the Hydro Cow.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that. A lot of information there. There's a lot more I can try to bring home here on a lot of this stuff. The Hydro, getting back to those other three products that are in the HydraSmart line, the Hydro Cow Dry Lime is a lime product, just like if you were planting grass in your home in the fall, you put down seed and lime and fertilizer. We do that on job sites as well. And with this hydroseeding formula, it's very microfine and very uh, goes very well through a hydroseeding pump, whereas agricultural lime is very dense. It really can wear on a hydroseeding pump long over time. It's fast acting lime. It adjusts the soil pH in as little as 6 to 8 weeks, whereas agricultural lime sometimes takes 3 to 4 months. It also, because of that, has a high calcium carbonate, high calcium content, excuse me, and which is soluble in the water, and it helps improve the nutrient uptake. So this is basically a lime that is already in use and has been for a good number of years in the hydroseeding community. It is a great staple to raising pH on a job site based on your soil test. Another thing that we make is Hydrotac Ultra. We make it in a liquid and also in a granular. It's a polyacrylamide, um, a polyacrylamide polymer that it helps to increase bonding to the soil. So if you're using a lower rate, or excuse me, a lower tier hydro mulch like a wood or a paper mulch, typically hydroseeders will add a tackifier to that. Higher end hydro mulches like a flexible growth medium or a bonded fiber matrix, those already have tack included in the bale, if that makes sense. So that we have a liquid and a granular version. It really depends on what the user likes to use. The last product in the lineup is something called HydroLock, and it is a non-toxic polymer that holds about 400 times its weight in water. It gradually releases that as the soil dries. And so if you're a turf grass person, there's some products like this out there already. One, it's called Aquazorb that people use. There's some other products like this that hydroseeders use. If you're a homeowner and you go in and there's different kinds of additives that you can buy to put in your house plants or your shrubs when you plant them outside, and it's based on this technology. We made this specifically for our company on both the T&O, turf and ornamental, and the hydroseeding markets. We landscapers will pick this up when they plant shrubs and annuals, but hydroseeders will also use it and add it to the tank. Now, the cost on this can sometimes be a little prohibited for a huge job site, But that being said, if you're planning uh, fescue or a Bermuda in the mid-Atlantic and the transition zone, or really it works on cool season and warm season grasses. And if you're doing residential yards with hydroseeding, it can be a great additive to the tank for yards that don't have irrigation. And basically, what will happen if you get a long-term event with no rain, the roots in the ground will start to pull the water that is being held by these polymers. So a great addition to certain job sites for moisture management. So in looking at all these together, let's take a look at um, fertilizer and lime like we do on a construction job site when we seed permanent seed. And most states in their erosion control handbooks will actually say to do a soil test. But then you have kind of this small print in every DEQ, excuse me, in every erosion control handbook. Here's Virginia's, because we're headquartered in Virginia. Said under unusual conditions where it's not possible to obtain a soil test, well, then they give you these recommendations, which Scott talked about, going back to the 1 to 1 to 1, or maybe a 1 to 2 to 1. Maybe it's a 19-19-19 or a 10-20-10. And what happens is because that little blurb is in there, that minimum amount becomes the plug number for bidding, what that contractors do, and a lot of times soil tests unfortunately aren't even taken on job sites. So if you look at the cost of that, each state is a little different, but generally we see 500 pounds of a 1 to 1 to 1 and 2,000 to 3,000 pounds of ag lime per acre that sometimes people bid. And if you were to look at this and look at the cost, you can see that broken down, that's about $522.50 an acre. So if you go back and you use the Hydra Acre and the Hydra-Build, which is the nutrient component of this, and then add in the Hydra Dry, because in the Mid-Atlantic we tend to see uh, soils that are low in pH, and they need to have their pH brought up to that range that Scott talked about for nutrient availability, where you're talking about $530 for this program. So the key here is that we're presenting this to you, and we're not presenting something that is going to break the bank. We're trying to create something here that aids in nutrient availability to the plant, instead of just, dumping the soil profile with a lot of fertilizer like Scott talked about that has been traditionally done. Now, what's interesting is that let's look at the sustainability comparison of this. When you think about the old school 19-19-19 fertilizers and some of these things out there, that's typically what agriculture started using. And like Scott said, it rolled over into construction. And now we have in some states they don't want to use phosphorus at all, because there's already phosphorus in the soil and it can run off easily with typical ag grade fertilizers. At the end of the day, there's two ways to look at phosphorus. One is a surface water contaminant, another is a building block of every living thing that's on Earth. And we can only hope that, it'll eventually be thought of as the latter, not the former. But we can talk about the sustainability of this in the sense that if you use this old program, in a 19-19-19 bag of fertilizer, there's 9.5 pounds of each one of those macronutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in in that bag. There's no micronutrients, there's no additive. So when Scott talks about, loading up the soil profile and hoping it works, this is what he means. This is what's typically been done in construction, that was done in ag and turf years ago. And what we're doing is we can present you with the same thing here. So this is the same program as the previous slide with the cost, with it's actually, excuse me, 2.5 gallons of Hydra Acre and 5 bags of Hydra Build. And with that, you have the NPK per acre of 26 pounds of nitrogen, roughly 17 pounds of phosphorus, and 21 pounds of potassium. So keep in mind with the original one up top, you're looking at a granular prill. If you're not hydroseeding, it could run off, it could get in the waterways, it could increase the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in waterways. And that's going to happen less with hydroseeding because that hydromulch is keeping it in place, but also your nutrients are lower because your nutrients are being used by the soil, and they're more efficient, and that's why we're saying less is more. A lot of you that may have an agricultural background, or maybe you grew up in a rural area. I grew up in a very rural community, agricultural community, and I can remember farmers talking at planting time and listening to them and talking about their crop yields. And they would talk about fertilizing, and they would talk about the nutrients in the soil, and they'd say something like, well, I've got all this phosphorus in the soil, but it's locked up. And what they meant by that is exactly what Scott was talking about, going back to that Nexus technology. When these ions hit together, sometimes the phosphorus will bond with the calcium or different things, and they'll grab each other, and then they won't be available to the plant. So with this product, you've got availability to the plant and also aiding the soil. Now, let's look at this from the standpoint of sustainability with regards to logistics. And I knew that the cost comparison and the NP and K was the same, but this is something I really started looking at recently when I was on a job site. So if you look at where we are, if you look at this old school way of 19 fertilizer, and you have 500 pounds per acre and 2,500 pounds of ag lime, you're talking about 60 bags per acre. Okay. Now, if you use this product with, 2.5 gallons of Hydra Acre, 5 bags of Build, and 6 bags of the Hydrocal dry lime, you're talking about 11 bags and one jug of product compared to 60 bags. Okay. Now you extrapolate that over to, the number of pallets per acre. You've got 1.5 pallets in the old way and a quarter pallet of the new way. Okay, now let's say you're a hydroseeder, or you're a construction company that owns a hydroseeder that is working on a roadside or an energy sector or a neighborhood or whatever, and it's a 10-acre site. That equates to, the old way equates to 600 bags, okay, that you're going to have waste. You're going to have manpower loading those bags on your hydroseeder, uh, cutting them open, putting them in the tank, and then also the waste involved at the end of that. With this HydraSmart product, you're talking about 110 bags total, 5 boxes. All of that can fit on 3 pallets, and we can ship that to you at a job site. So think about what that could do with your life cycle cost and lowering your per acre cost based on waste and manpower. It's really quite unique in what we've created here. So you have the sustainability of the NP and K, but you also have the logistical sustainability. And that's what we mean when we talk about less is more. So as we start to wrap up here, it's important that we remember a couple things. This was built by hydroseeders for hydroseeders from the ground up. It's easy on machine pumps. It's research driven and proprietary functions that establish vegetation, and they efficiently use the nutrients that you're putting out. It's not just like a shotgun approach where you're loading up the soil profile with a bunch of fertilizer. Okay. Polymers, cations, beneficial bacteria, these things aren't new. They've been around for years in agriculture, in fruit production, in turf grass. These are things that are regulated, and they're in products in Lowe's and Home Depot that you're using when you're going to plant shrubs or trees, or using on your yard. It's just they haven't made it to construction yet until now, and that's what we're doing. So while this is new to the construction industry, a lot of this stuff is not new to plant and soil health. That's where we really think we are doing great here is we've created a sustainable set of products through this nutrient system that can create less inputs and better results. So it's a cost effective compared to older cut and paste specifications, and it's environmentally sustainable. And it's also what I like to call logistically sustainable. It can lower your carbon footprint based on the number of bags you've got, based on the number of pallets that are being delivered on a truck to a job site, all of that. So I'll start to ask to take on questions now. I know we've got some that have come in, but while I'm answering questions, I like to leave this last slide up. My information is on here. Scott's information is on here. If you have questions, if you'd like to try this on one of your sites, we can help you in any number of ways. We can come out, we can take a soil test. You can use the basic premise of a gallon and 5 bags, excuse me, of 2.5 gallons and 5 bags of build, like we've talked about, in comparison to maybe some older specs, or we can take a soil test and design something specifically for you. If you're an engineer, we can help you specify this if you'd like to. If you're a municipality that wants to use this in a public works or parks and rec setting, we can do that as well. One of the things we really didn't hit on is that, while we love the aspect of the nutrient system, is that you can use one of these products without the other. You can use the build if you're using a hopper or a whirlybird spreader. If you have a 1919 fertilizer that you're using on a state project that, has to be that because of the state that you're in, we have a lot of hydroseeders that are actually adding the Hydra Acre just as a bonus. And really, they like to use it because they know it works and they'll get less callbacks. So um, let's see. So one of the let me go through here and get some questions going. One of the first questions as I start to look at these is I've got, and Scott, you might can talk about this. Think you hit it a little bit, but it says, how does the nutrients package hold up in different types of soils? Will it work in sandy soils as well as clay soils?
Joe, that's a great question. I did touch on it a little bit, but I'll go ahead and go through all the different things that you're going to get out of that nutrient system in a sandy soil. With the multiple different carbon sources in both the acre and the build product, it will help increase the CEC, improve the biological system, help sandy soils hold on to more water, and cycle nutrients more efficiently.
Very true, very true. Another question we've got is, are we starting to be a filtering out of just the hydromulches? Are there fertility additions gaining more market share? We certainly think so, and a lot of that talks about a lot of that goes back to what Scott talked about and I talked about how hydroseeders would go to mom and pop garden centers or ag stores and try to find some sort of better nutrients just than 19, 19, 19. And but again, remember that that's all just trial and error that they were doing. This is one of the few products, if not the only products we know in the market that was built from the ground up, really with hydroseeders in mind. Let's see. Another question is, um, are there any types of soils that would not allow the hydroseed to germinate? Yeah, that's possible, but if you just blanketly put it out, but if you have a soil test, we can address any type of soil problem that you have. Granted, there are some soils out there that might be really high in a micronutrient, or they might be coarse soils with really low pH. In general, most parts of the country have low pH soils. Some areas of the country have high pH soils, and you use something like gypsum to lower the pH instead of lime. So yes, if you just blanketly try to shoot something out there, there is the chance that it's not going to be what your soil needs. That's why a soil test is important. You would be amazed at the number of projects I go on where they can't grow grass, and I say, well, let me see your soil test, and I get blank stares. And a $15 soil test has not been done on a $15 million project. It happens every day. Um, last question I think here is if seed bread preparation prior to the application of these products, how does the liquid move down 5 to 6 inches through the soil profile where the roots are developing? Would it be trapped or collected in the top 2 inches of the soil?
I think that question probably pertains to a compacted site, Joe. Compacted sites are always going to be tough. Can you get seed to establish on a compacted site? Absolutely. Would it be great if you could loosen that top, you know, 3 to 4 inches? I don't think it necessarily needs to be 5 to 6, but 3 to 4 inches. That would be fantastic. But for most of these sites, I mean, if you can get the plant to establish, there a lot of them are like forage grasses and stuff like that, and they're going to be growing up a lot higher. You think about a forage grass, how tall it gets, how big the root system is. If you've got the biology working and you've got, basically the top couple of inches of soil working, those roots are going to mine and break up a lot of that compaction. You're not going to see that on like a home lawn or on a golf course where you're mowing down these grasses that were once forage grasses. They're going to be a little bit more flimsy and not as strong or as stout as on construction sites. But I really, if you could break up that top 3 to 4 inches, it would be great. But I also understand that that's not realistic on most sites. And as long as you can get these natives and forage grasses and stuff like that established, they should do a lot of the work for you as far as breaking up some of that compaction.
Yeah, so I'll add to that also in that, a lot of the how hydroseeding is done now, you want those nutrients in the hydroseeder in the seed bed because that's where the seed is going to germinate. Okay. And what's interesting about this process versus the old 10-20-20 or the old 19-19-19 is that when you put that out there, it just basically hits the roots and then it's all gone within 2 to 3 days tops. With this product, you've got the Nexus technologies that can allow all of those nutrients to work, but you've also got the added bonus of the composted material in the build that is actually a soil amendment. So that would essentially help that as well. So another question is Hydrocal a 90% calcium carbonate? Yes, it is. That's what the DOT requires here. That's what most of them is. I'm 90% sure. I'm pretty sure that's a 90% calcium carbonate. I'll look into that and get back to you. Maybe shoot you an email. But I do know that most of the states we work in, the Hydrocal Lime Dry is approved by the DOT. So it looks like we've caught up most of the questions here. We've got some good ones. I appreciate a lot of this. It looks like we've got folks from all over the country here, a lot in the Mid-Atlantic, but folks from as far away from as Anaheim, California, and Minnesota. I really appreciate everybody joining in. Again, if you think about questions, uh, after this, certainly give me a ring or shoot Scott and I an email. We'll be glad to address them. Also, I'm going to put this on our Environmental Construction Solutions YouTube page. So if you want to go back or share this with someone, you'll be able to. I'll try to have that uploaded by maybe tomorrow. And lastly, I mentioned it, it's worth mentioning again, you can get a PDH for attending today's webinar. You just go to that ecsproductsva.com/PDH website and you put your name and you put that 5-digit code in there. And in 2 to 3 days, you'll get emailed a PDH that looks like the one over there on the left. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. We have one more webinar next month before the end of the year. And if you want to check online and look into that and join us, we hope to see you again. And Scott, I want to thank you for joining in today. I really appreciate you being here and helping me out with this.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks again.